The Galactic Meridian Academy had seen many things in its 400-year history. It had seen the enrollment of 17 different species. It had witnessed the occasional explosion in Lab 7, which everyone had quietly agreed to stop talking about. It had even survived the Great Cafeteria Incident of 2287, which involved a Vrelian student, 17 liters of gravity gel, and a ceiling that still had not been properly repaired. But it had never, not once in 4 centuries, seen anything quite like her. Her name, according to the enrollment documents, was Mira Voss. She walked through the main gates of the academy on a Tuesday morning, which is frankly the least dramatic day of the week to arrive and change the course of galactic history, but apparently nobody had consulted the calendar. I was standing near the registration desk when she walked in. My name is Doro, a Peluvian administrative assistant, and I want to make it very clear that I was not staring. I was simply observing. With great intensity. For an extended period of time. She was human. That much was obvious. Humans had been attending the academy for about 60 years now, ever since the Galactic Council had finally agreed that yes, fine, the small aggressive mammals from the third planet of the Sol system probably deserved an education. They were loud, they were emotional, they cried at music, and they had this bizarre habit of laughing at things that were not funny, but they were, grudgingly, accepted. This one, however, was different. She was not nervous. Every single human who had ever walked through those gates had been nervous. The Meridian Academy was the most prestigious institution in 14 star systems. Students arrived sweating, trembling, and in one memorable case, fainting before they even reached the front desk. It was almost a tradition at this point. Mira Voss did not sweat. She did not tremble. She looked around the grand entrance hall with its towering arches and its walls lined with the portraits of legendary graduates, and she looked, mildly curious. Like someone who had walked into a moderately interesting museum. Registration? She asked me. Yes, I said. Down the hall, third door on the left. And, welcome to the academy. She gave me a small smile. Thanks. That was it. No gasping at the architecture. No stumbling over the glowing floor panels. No dropping of belongings. She simply walked down the hall, opened the third door on the left, and disappeared inside. I stood there for a moment. Then I went to find my colleague Breck. Something strange just arrived, I told him. Define strange, said Breck, who was a Shuvian and therefore had an extremely high threshold for what counted as unusual. He had once watched a student accidentally teleport himself into the water fountain and had described it as a minor inconvenience. Human female. Young. Does not appear to be afraid of anything. Breck looked up from his datapad. That is strange. The real trouble, if I am being completely honest, started at the orientation assembly. Every new student was required to attend. The senior faculty would introduce themselves, the academy's rules would be recited, and then there would be a small demonstration by the top students of each discipline to show the newcomers what they were working toward. It was meant to be inspiring. It was, in practice, mostly terrifying. The Dean of Admissions, a towering Crevian named Summis, stood at the podium and surveyed the new batch of students with the kind of expression that made most of them want to immediately transfer to a less prestigious institution. You are here, said Summis, because you are the best. The finest minds, the sharpest instincts, the most capable individuals your respective worlds have produced. This academy will either forge you into something extraordinary, or it will break you entirely. He paused for effect. Welcome. In the third row, Mira Voss yawned. Not loudly. Not deliberately. She covered her mouth, she was polite about it, but she yawned. During Summis's welcome speech. Which no student in the history of the academy had ever dared to do, because Summis had eyes like a surveillance system and a memory like a steel trap. Summis stopped mid-sentence. The entire assembly hall went very, very quiet. I was watching from the side of the room, and I can tell you with complete confidence that approximately 300 students collectively stopped breathing. Summis looked at Mira. Mira looked at Summis. Neither of them moved. Then Summis said, slowly, "Do you find this boring, student?" And Mira Voss said, "Not yet." The silence that followed was the loudest silence I have ever heard in my life. Somewhere in the back row, a Delphian student made a noise that sounded like a small animal being stepped on. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. Summis stared at her for a long, long moment. Then, for the first time in 37 years of running orientation assemblies, Summis smiled. "Good," he said. And he continued his speech. That was when I knew. That was the exact moment I understood that this girl was not simply a student. She was something else entirely. Something the Academy had not prepared for. The question was, what exactly? Nobody knew yet. But by the end of the first week, everyone was asking. The first week passed like a slow-moving comet. Dramatic, impossible to ignore, and leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Mira Voss enrolled in the Advanced Combat Theory class, the Interstellar Navigation program, the Xenobiology track, and, for reasons nobody could explain, Intermediate Pottery. The pottery part was what confused everyone the most. Combat theory made sense. Navigation made sense. But pottery? The Meridian Academy offered it as a stress relief elective for students who were quietly falling apart under the pressure. Nobody took it seriously. Nobody voluntarily signed up for it during their first week. Mira had apparently signed up for it on her first day. Before she had even been assigned a dormitory room. Her combat theory instructor was a Vrelian veteran named Tavar. Tavar had 3 arms, 2 of which he had lost in separate conflicts and had replaced with mechanical ones, and 0 patience for students who thought they already knew everything. He began every class the same way. He picked the most confident-looking student in the room and asked them to demonstrate a basic defensive formation. Then he dismantled everything they did and rebuilt their understanding from the ground up. It was humbling. It was brutal. It was extremely effective. On the first day, he looked around the room and his eyes settled on Mira. Of course they did. "You," said Tavar, pointing at her with his original arm, which students had learned to pay attention to because the mechanical ones pointed at everyone. "Come to the center." Mira stood up without hesitation and walked to the center of the training floor. "Show me a defensive formation," said Tavar. She stood still for a moment. Just a moment. Then she shifted her weight slightly, dropped her center of gravity by maybe 3 centimeters, and positioned her hands in a configuration that I am told, by people who understand these things far better than I do, was not a standard defensive formation from any known combat doctrine in the galactic database. Tavar stared at her. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. "My mother," said Mira. "Your mother," repeated Tavar. Slowly. Like he was tasting the words and finding them confusing. "Yes." Tavar walked a full circle around her, studying her posture with the kind of attention usually reserved for ancient artifacts and suspicious parcels. Then he stopped in front of her and said, "That formation predates the Galactic Combat Codex by approximately 200 years. It has not been formally taught anywhere in the known systems for at least a century and a half." Mira blinked. "Oh," she said. She never mentioned that part. The class was very quiet. Tavar looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "Sit down. Everyone else, take notes." That story reached the faculty lounge by lunch. By dinner, it had reached the senior dormitories. By the following morning, it had developed 3 separate theories attached to it, each more elaborate than the last. Theory 1 was that Mira was the daughter of some legendary operative who had gone off-grid decades ago. Theory 2 was that she was some kind of engineered prodigy, grown in a lab somewhere and fed combat knowledge intravenously, which was not how biology worked, but nobody let that stop them. Theory 3, which was my personal favorite for sheer creativity, was that she was not actually human at all but some kind of shape-shifting entity who had chosen human form because it was, statistically, the least threatening option available. I did not personally endorse any of these theories. I simply listened to all of them with great interest and kept my observations to myself. The moment that changed everything, however, did not happen in combat theory. It happened in Xenobiology, on a Thursday afternoon, when Professor Sheila Vund was demonstrating the cellular structure of a Type 4 Carovian organism. Sheila Vund was brilliant, methodical, and deeply proud of her work. She pulled up the holographic display, walked the class through the outer membrane structure, and then paused for questions. Mira raised her hand. "Yes," said Vund. "The nutrient absorption channels on the secondary membrane," said Mira. "They are running in the wrong direction." The room went so quiet that you could hear the ventilation system thinking. Vund looked at the display. Then she looked at Mira. "This is a peer-reviewed model," she said carefully. "Published by the Galactic Biology Institute 14 years ago." "I know," said Mira. "It is still wrong." Vund pulled up her original research files. She cross-referenced 3 separate studies. She stood there in silence for approximately 90 seconds, which felt significantly longer than 90 seconds to everyone watching. Then she said, very quietly, "She is correct." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Mira was sitting in the second row with her datapad in her lap, looking like she had simply pointed out that someone had left a light on. After class, Vund did not dismiss her students and go to her office. She walked directly to Dean Summis and closed the door behind her. That door stayed closed for 2 hours. I walked past it 3 times. Purely by coincidence. What I do know is what happened the following morning. Summis called Mira into his office. She walked in, sat down across from one of the most powerful academic figures in the galaxy, and folded her hands in her lap. Summis looked at her for a long time before speaking. "Who are you?" he asked. Not as an accusation. Not as a challenge. As a genuine question, from a man who had spent 37 years believing he had seen everything. Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I am a student." "That is not what I asked." She looked at him steadily. "I know," she said. "But it is the only answer I am allowed to give you right now." Summis leaned back in his chair. "And when will you be allowed to give me a different one?" Mira smiled. It was a small smile, patient and a little sad, like someone who was carrying something heavy and had gotten used to the weight. "When it matters enough," she said. She walked out of his office, down the corridor, collected her materials, and went to pottery class. The clay did not stand a chance. And somewhere in the 14 star systems that fed students into the Meridian Academy, something had shifted. Something had noticed that Mira Voss had arrived. Something was watching. Something was waiting. The Academy had survived 400 years of history. The real question now was whether it was ready for whatever came next. Friends, if you are enjoying our videos and want to watch new and exciting sci-fi and HFY stories every day, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, make sure to turn on the bell icon so you never miss any of our latest uploads. Like the video and share it with your friends as well, so our community can continue to grow and bring you even more amazing content.